Hey, happy Friday. This week LG showed some very exciting new camera tech that might mean the end of the camera bump as we know it. Apple had some very uncharacteristic hiccups with their chip design process, and GPU sales are doing absolutely terribly. Welcome to the Friday Checkout. This video wasn't sponsored by anyone, but just as a quick reminder, the Curiosity Stream and Nebula bundle are on sale for the last few days for the holidays, so if you want to check that out, links are down in the description. Okay, CES is still a few days away, but LG and Samsung are already pre-announcing a few things, which is exactly what we'll start our brief with. First, LG announced OLED gaming monitors with the highest OLED refresh rates ever at 240Hz, really pushing OLED tech further into gaming dungeons, and LG Display also previewed its first ever automotive booth at CES, focusing on displays for cars, as the front of the cars of the very near future might become more like big media hubs. There's no word on the refresh rate of those displays in the car, so maybe for the gamers who want to game in the car, they might have to wait until next year. Then Samsung announced putting a 32-inch screen on a fridge with a built-in touchscreen, and in Korea at least, it also comes with Samsung's TV Plus service. Watching TV on a vertical screen on a fridge? That's next level innovation if I've ever seen any. Next, Twitter's new rival, Mastodon, said that it had been rejecting large funding offers from Silicon Valley to preserve its non-profit status, with its founder saying that Mastodon will not turn into everything you hate about Twitter. That's, I guess, an admirable approach. Then TSMC hit mass production for its 3nm chips with a ceremony celebrating the news. Apple will reportedly be its first primary customer with the M2 Pro chips, using the new process for Macs like the next MacBook Pro. TSMC says that 3nm chips use about 35% less power versus its 5nm process. Sounds good if it's true. But speaking of next generation chips, this week we also got some worrying news saying that there might be some hard limits that we're hitting with all of this scaling, specifically with something called SRAM. While the so-called logic transistors keep scaling down to become smaller and smaller on processors, the memory used as cache on the chips themselves, called SRAM, appears to have stopped shrinking completely across all fabs. SRAM has historically been part of the main chip itself, and its role is increasingly becoming more and more important, so it not scaling might be a huge drag going forward. It's as if you had a car that kept getting faster and more efficient each year, but then each year it also had to keep dragging the same trailer behind it, so many of the improvements kind of got lost on the way. Then, in more bad news, VR and AR headset sales seem like they've actually fallen year on year, with US sales falling 2% and worldwide sales declining 12% year on year. It's not entirely surprising because the Quest 2, which does by far the highest volumes in the industry, is now 2 years old and actually went up in price recently, but still that's not great for an industry that's supposed to be growing quickly. And finally, as a fun fact for the end of the year, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's final Sherlock Holmes stories will this weekend see their US copyright protections expire, so they're now in the public domain for anyone to do with as they please, right along with one of my favorite science fiction classics ever, Metropolis, which I made my very first Technorama episode on. Fun! Okay, that's it for the brief, and my first story of the week is going to be LG promising true variable zoom optically for pretty much all smartphones out there that want to have it, and potentially also the end of the camera bump, which I find very exciting. So LG Innotek just announced a brand new camera module with 4 to 9 times continuous optical zoom using real moving lenses, a folded optic design, and even image stabilization, all while being super slim. Now, Sony has, of course, already offered a similar optical solution in their Xperia 1 Mark IV, though with a much smaller range, and Oppo has also teased us about their solution last year. But the big deal is that LG Innotek, which is a company that integrates camera components into full modules that it kind of sells to any phone maker, is now offering this as a simple off-the-shelf component that pretty much anyone can just buy and soon make a phone out of. And on top of that, LG is also working with Qualcomm to make sure that the image processing pipeline of a Snapdragon 8 Gen 2, for example, can handle variable zoom lenses like this out of the box. LG Innotek is Apple's largest optics partner, for example, selling nearly $8 billion in camera modules to the company for the iPhone in 2021. So they are a huge player, and I guess that means that beside Android flagships, one might also expect Apple to pick up some sort of variable zoom tech for their phones soon too. LG managed to move the various optical elements like the lenses down to a micrometer, which is absolutely tiny, and this kind of fine control might lead to the end of the camera bump as we know it, in a few ways. First, the current zoom lens is just really thin itself, and being properly variable means that phone makers can just put fewer camera lenses into their phones and still cover the whole range. But second, if you can reliably move elements like lenses around with this kind of precision, that would mean that we would soon be able to do what point-and-shoot cameras have been able to do for decades, which is to make basically a retractable lens, which might mean having no camera bump. You might remember from a few weeks ago that the Techno Phantom X2 Pro did pretty much exactly that, basically letting the lens recede into the phone frame when not in use. And I guess someone at LG or a company like it will bring an off-the-shelf version of that same tech to market soon for everyone to enjoy as well. I guess with movable lenses, the question is waterproofing, but engineers have figured out harder problems, so it's pretty exciting. Okay, my second story of the week is going to be Apple making a pretty uncharacteristically big set of mistakes with the A16 Bionic chips, which then in turn impacted the iPhone 14 Pro series. You might remember that Apple's newest iPhone chip, the A16, was surprisingly similar to its predecessor, the A15, and that the company suspiciously didn't even mention graphics when they launched the chip in September, and now we think we might know why. The information reported that Apple engineers went ahead and designed and tested a next-gen GPU that supports ray tracing, but the Silicon team discovered design mistakes quite late in the process and then was forced to abandon that development and mostly just use the same GPU as they did in the previous generation. Apple's Silicon engineers were apparently too ambitious with adding new features, but weren't able to deliver, which was described as unprecedented in the group's history. Apple obviously has a major lead over many of its competitors in the chip department, so them skipping a year isn't exactly going to take the whole company down or anything like that, but it is a kind of uncharacteristic mistake that we haven't seen from Apple basically ever in the chip department, and people are saying that it might be related to the company having a hard time retaining talent. Key people like Gerald Williams are gone, who led development from the A7 to the A12X before he left to found Nuvia in 2019, which was acquired by Qualcomm. His replacement, Mike Filippo, didn't mesh with the other engineers and quickly departed to join Microsoft, and Apple hasn't found anyone to replace him yet. Ouch. And if you remember, Samsung had a similar kind of issue with their GPU designs very recently, although theirs seemed to be even more severe, so this is hardly anything unique to Apple, but it is kind of unique and interesting to see this happening at Apple too, who we until now kind of assumed was just perfect in every way with their chip design. Okay, and my last story of the week is going to be another sign that the consumer electronics industry is having a pretty rough time, and this time we're going to talk about the GPUs. Now, we already knew that crypto mining is facing a deep winter with prices plummeting, electricity prices rising, and Ethereum going proof of stake, leaving a lot more GPUs on the table for gamers and enthusiasts. But this week we also learned that not even those gamers are buying GPUs either, with sales absolutely tanking. Analysts at John Petty Research said that the industry shipped 32% fewer discrete GPUs than a year prior. This was the absolute lowest number of graphics cards shipped since at least Q3 of 2005, almost 20 years ago. Combined, the collapse of crypto and also to some degree gaming is a pretty big 1-2 punch for GPU makers, but potentially could be a good deal for you. You might find some better priced cards on the market now. And despite everyone mocking Nvidia for releasing very expensive new cards this year, the Green Giant actually strengthened its position to an 86% market share, its highest ever, while AMD dropped to around 10%, its lowest point in decades. That leaves newcomer Intel, which did manage to get a surprisingly solid 4% share of the desktop discrete GPU market in just one quarter, meaning it's now not too far behind Team Red. Weird. The downturn is probably driven by a perfect storm of everyone just having bought new hardware during the lockdowns, the used market being flooded with mining GPUs, the general economic uncertainties, and the new generation of cards being just a little bit expensive and kind of underwhelming. I guess it's not an easy time being a multi-billion-dollar chip giant. Boo-hoo. Okay, I don't have a sponsor this week, but this is your final reminder that we're in the last few days of the holiday discount for the CuriosityStream Nebula bundle. You can get both services for the next few days still for just, I think, under $12 for an entire year, which is a pretty insane deal, and links to that are down in the description. The sign-up page on CuriosityStream might be a little bit confusing, implying that you only get Nebula with one of their premium plans, but that is not actually the case. If you use my link and/or code, even the cheapest plan for less than $1 a month will still get you both, and you will simply receive an email with Nebula instructions after you sign up for CuriosityStream. So check that out at the link in the description. Happy browsing, and I'll see you next Friday and also next year. Happy New Year.